Hello everyone and welcome to another casual review. Today I'm talking about Elden Ring. I was very hesitant to buy this game and plunge into it, and for those of you who are not familiar with FromSoft games, FromSoft is a company that makes these notoriously difficult games. They came onto my radar when they released the game Dark Souls, but I think the game that really exploded them in popularity was the game Bloodborne. I tried out both of these games because of the amount of praise that they got, and I've played a lot of games that are adjacent to this. In fact, these two games really started a whole gaming genre now known as Soulsborne games, and they have a lot of features that other games have taken from them. For instance, when you die, you drop your experience in order to level up, and if you die before you pick up that experience, then you lose it forever. So lots of games tend to do that nowadays. Hollow Knight comes to mind for sure. Notoriously difficult bosses, but they also have choreographed animations, and so you start developing almost like a second sense in what you need to do in order to avoid boss attacks. Dark, grim, gritty worlds, a very rich and deep lore, but you also need to do a lot of research in the world around you in order to actually find out what's going on. They don't plain out just tell you the story. And as my gaming career, I guess you could say, continued, I just heard more and more about these Soulsborne games. And so when I tried out Dark Souls, I got discouraged dying over and over again. And then Bloodborne, kind of the same thing. You know, I bounced off of these games after an hour or two, and all I hear is just how amazing they are. So Elden Ring is FromSoft's newest installment, and the whole thing about this game is, yes, it's like a Soulsborne game, but the twist is it's open world, and so you have a lot of exploration. That's not to say that there's no exploration in like Dark Souls or Bloodborne, but it's more like you have multiple pathways, whereas this one, it's like a legitimate open world game. And originally, anytime I just heard the name FromSoft, I bounced off it. I'm like, no, I've tried out Dark Souls, I've tried out Bloodborne, I know that type of game is not for me. But whenever you look at like top 10 lists, or whenever you look online like best PlayStation 5 game, Elden Ring is almost always on the top. And I kind of felt like I was just somebody peeping into a window while everyone's having an Elden Ring party and having a good time inside, and I really wanted to join them. And I had this determination where I just wanted to see what exactly am I missing out on. And so I actually earned a $50 Amazon gift card, and I looked up online, and I was able to get a PlayStation 5 copy for $40. And since it's my summer and I don't have to work and I have all this time on my hand, I was like, yep, I'm finally going to do it. If it takes me banging my head up against the wall, I need to find out what makes FromSoft games so enjoyable for others. And 65 hours later, I'm here to report that I have beat Elden Ring, and I'm so excited to tell you all about my experience. Now, let's talk about the world building in this game, because the world itself is so fascinating, and I know almost nothing about it still at this point. The developers of this game really touted George R.R. Martin's involvement in terms of, well, I'm actually not sure how he was involved in this game, but George R.R. Martin is the person who wrote the Game of Thrones series, and apparently he had some involvement in this game. I don't know if it was necessarily just about the lore or the world building. For all I know, he just wrote his name on it, and they really pushed his name, just trying to get more people to play this game. To be honest, I don't really know what I did in this game. Like, I know what I did, but I didn't know exactly like why I was doing it. It's just like Hollow Knight, where I feel like I played through the game, I enjoyed it, I have my own theories and headcanon into exactly like what's going on in this game, but in terms of like what's really going on, I don't know why I'm fighting these big bosses. What I do know is I'm something called a Tarnished, and I wanted to get to the Erd Tree to become the Elden Lord. And other than that, like, I don't know for sure exactly the lore. It's really the type of game where you need to watch like a 3-hour YouTube explanation in order to exactly know what's going on, because a lot of the stuff is fairly cryptic, especially if you don't go reading all of the graves and the signs and the item descriptions. There are some cinematics that are super cool in this game, and I do like how they actually show like your character and what your character looks like in these cinematics. But it's just like I'm watching these cinematics and I'll get it, like one of the bosses like, "Ha, Tarnished, you really think you can persevere to Malekith? You're a foolish mortal," or, you know, they just say something like that, and I'm just like, okay, buddy, I don't know why I'm fighting you. I only understand half of the things that you're saying to me, but you're going down. But at the same time, the mystery of the lore and this world, it is pretty intriguing. Like, it pulls you in. You do kind of want to learn like why you're doing this, and learn more about like why the world is in the state that it is, why these bosses look like this, and why these bosses are in these situations. You have like this main central hub that all the Tarnished hang out at, and this is kind of like your area that you can like upgrade your gear, and you can like learn new abilities, kind of get some cryptic hints as to where you're supposed to go. And just talking to all these other Tarnished, it is pretty interesting because like they all have their own unique personalities and like their own history. There's this one troll-looking creature that is like your main blacksmith, who will be doing most of your upgrading for your abilities. And just like learning about him, or trying to learn rather, like he's chained up and he's pretty quiet, but then you can also have these options to like talk to him and kind of get these clues as to why he's here and what he's all about. That's another thing about this game, is in order to actually like receive certain information, you have to talk to them multiple times, which isn't very common in normal video games. You talk to a guy once, they'll say their thing, and then if you talk to them again, they say the exact same thing. But in this game, you also have to talk to certain characters 2 or 3 multiple times, and they'll have like different things to say. So you want to keep talking to people, and you want to expend all of the dialogue in order to get all of the information that may or may not be crucial to you. And essentially, you are just plunged into this huge continent, and it is very... I don't want to use the word grim. There's grim here. There's gritty. There's that FromSoft darkness that is often associated with their games. But at the same time, like, this is such a beautiful world. Right when you get out of like this underground area that you start out in, you immediately see this giant golden tree just like shrouding everything else. And this giant golden tree is called the Erd Tree, and it's basically like your main objective for the majority of the game, just to get to this thing. And the whole time you're playing, it's just always there whenever you look up. And it's really fascinating because I normally associate these games with very boring, ugly, gritty colors. Lots of blacks and grays and browns. But in this game, it's almost just like this golden tree just enshrines everything around it. And there's some really breathtaking moments. There's really breathtaking environments that you explore. It's not just black and gray and brown. Like, sometimes you go into an area and it almost looks like it's autumn, where you get these like golden leaves falling from the sky. Or there's this whole underground area where it doesn't make sense, but when you like look up, it's just like covered in stars and planets and stuff. It's so amazing, just like exploring this vast world and seeing this crazy environment all over. It really is beautiful, but at the same time, it is pretty depressing because like most of the buildings around you just have been completely destroyed or flooded, and there's just like so much architecture that has just been crumbled into the ground, and you're just like exploring all these different ruins. Not to mention the enemies and the characters in this game. There's lots of like zombie-like creatures and really, really grotesque enemies in this game. Like, some of the bosses are just horrifying. They're just nightmare fuel. You'll come across like this weird centipede thing that just has a bunch of like human arms. So much gore and blood, and it's legitimately pretty disgusting. Like, but also like you're just drawn in, and you're just it's almost like too horrifying that you can't look away. There's this one particular boss that I'm thinking of, and he's just think of like a giant snake, but then on the back of him is just like a giant human face, and he also has giant limbs. And when you like halfway beat this snake weird boss, he like plunges his fist into the snake's mouth and pulls out this huge bloody sword with all these little appendages sticking out of it. It's like, who thought of these enemy designs? Because they're so grotesque but also fascinating at the same time, and also horrifying. Like the noises that come out of these things, like all of the characters and the whole world, it's really just something to behold. And so if you are put off by the combat, you're kind of like missing out on all of this world building and character design that you're probably not going to see anywhere else. So let's talk about the combat, because FromSoft games are notorious for difficult combat, and at the beginning of the game, yes, you are going to die a lot. I went into this game prepared to die a lot because I knew that there is a learning curve here. One thing that I really don't like about FromSoft games is the fans can be a little gatekeepy, in that it's kind of like a meme at this point when somebody will like go online and ask for advice or help on a FromSoft game. The common reply is get good. You know, it's like, it's all you just gotta get good. And it's just like, cool, thanks for the advice, I guess. Like that's not to say that some fans don't actually have like legitimate advice, but in FromSoft games, you're told to just get good, or maybe these games aren't for you. There's this whole difficulty debate about these games where there's only one difficulty, and I guess the default difficulty in this game is either hard or very hard, depending on who you talk to. And whenever anybody asks for different difficulty modes for these FromSoft games, like an easy difficulty mode, a lot of people tend to scoff at it, which I think is kind of ridiculous. Just because other people would be able to play this game on easy difficulty doesn't mean that it would take away that really difficult experience from you if you wanted to keep it on harder difficulty, but that's a discussion for another day. In this game, often the solution really is, though, to get good, but I'm not necessarily just talking about your own personal skills, because there is like an RPG mechanic here where your character that you're playing as can get good. And I'm talking about leveling up. How you level up in this game is whenever you defeat an enemy, you acquire runes. And runes are basically like experience points. Whenever you go to these grace points, these are like safe zones that you can fast travel to. Whenever you get to one of these grace points, you can cash in your runes in order to add a point to a particular attribute. So if you wanted to increase your health, or the amount of dexterity that you do, or strength, or maybe you want to be more of like a spellcaster, you can put points into your intelligence. And slowly but surely, you yourself, the player, are going to get good as you get used to the combat and how to play, and you familiarize yourself with your weapons, but your character that you're playing as will also get good. So maybe if the player is just not good enough, the cool thing about this game being open world is there's so many other areas that you can explore to level up your character so that your character can get good. And then eventually you can return back to this difficult challenge. The way that I learned this lesson, and I'm sure a lot of other players learned this lesson as well, is there's a certain like bottleneck point that you have to get through in order to progress in the game, and it is blocked off by this big guy named Margit. And Margit is like the first big boss that you actually face. And when I was playing through this game, you know, I was dying, but I was also slowly but surely making my way towards this main bottleneck. But once I got to Margit, I just kept dying over and over again, and I could start feeling that frustration and that willingness to give up like I have with Dark Souls and Bloodborne. But then you do realize, hey, I haven't explored this whole other area of the map. Why don't I just go do that instead? And so if you're not the type of person that likes to bang their head against the wall and really master the choreography of the boss fight, there's other things that you can do to get good. And this happened so many times I'd encounter like this huge boss that would absolutely kick my butt, and I would just go train somewhere else, explore a different area, and then I'd return, and then I got to kick that guy's butt. And so you really get to feel this progression of you getting better. The player and the character that you're playing as, like you really start feeling so strong, and it makes you feel so good about yourself when you finally beat that boss that was really kicking your butt. Ultimately, the character that I decided to build was a heavyset character. In order to wear really heavy armor and be able to wield the really heavy weapon that you want, you need to put points in your endurance. And right at the beginning of the game, you're going to get a lot of really heavy armor that you don't have enough endurance to wear. And I decided that my goal was to make my character look as cool as possible. And so I ended up dumping a ton of points into my endurance. I was able to wear all the really heavy chainmail. I had a really heavy duty shield and a giant weapon, because originally, as you make your character, there's like a couple different quote unquote classes that you get to choose what your character is. And these are really just like a touching off point, where it gives you certain points in certain attributes. It gives you a starting weapon, but really you can like change your character as you move along. And so originally, whenever I play games like this, I really like to have a two-handed giant weapon that just hits super hard. And that's originally what I was doing, but eventually I realized that I needed a giant shield to hide behind, so the enemies can really tire themselves out whacking against my giant shield, and then once they tire themselves out, then I can hit them with my giant weapon. And yes, all of this requires a ton of stamina in order to pull off, because when you block with a shield, or when you swing with a weapon, or roll to dodge, this all takes up a resource called stamina. And this is all tied to your endurance skill point. So it was just a matter of my character getting good, leveling up, getting all that endurance, getting all that really cool armor and shield and weapon in order for me to progress. And this is what I would do most of the time. Pretty much through my whole playthrough, I had a giant shield and a giant weapon. And near the end of the game, I started getting a little more confident again to not have my shield and just two-hand a weapon, because when you two-hand a weapon, you're going to do a lot more damage. And so whenever I was just going around killing weaker enemies, just kind of doing an easy thing, then I would opt out for the shield. But when it was boss time and I needed to buckle down, yeah, you bet I pulled that shield back out. I did a little bit of spells. I put some points into my faith attribute, which let me kind of be like a basic paladin. I didn't really do too much with this though, because all your spells take a resource. I don't know if they call it mana or not, but something like that, and your mana does not regenerate on its own. You have to take potions in order to heal that back up, and I didn't like that, so I didn't do too many spells. But the spells that I did know were mostly like one where it would slowly regenerate my health. There's one where it like cleanses me of any like illness, like poison or anything. But yeah, typically I'm just sticking to that shield and that giant weapon. In addition to that, you are also given this ability where you can summon the spirits of, they're basically like spirits of previous enemies. And so if you need a little extra help, you can use these spirit summons basically to like summon additional help, so you're not just doing the whole fight on your own. These are very situational. You can't use them all the time, but typically they will allow you to summon a spirit during like a boss fight. And these are one-time use only until you return back to that grace point. For most of my game, I stuck with these guys. They have like 4 different arms, and they're called marionettes, and I really liked summoning them. It summons 2 of them, and they just shoot like a ton of arrows at the enemies, which I found to be pretty beneficial. Eventually, I found one of the strongest spirit summons in the game, the Mimic, which basically duplicates you, so you have like 2 of you fighting, which is probably overpowered, but at the same time, with a game like this, especially if you're a beginner, I say use every advantage that you possibly can in order to progress through. Speaking of which, there is some online gameplay here. I do not pay for PlayStation Premium or PlayStation Plus, whatever it's called, but this online functionality basically means that you can like summon other actual players to come in and help you fight. This also is a double-edged sword though, because other players can then invade your world and screw you over. Now, even though I didn't have the PlayStation Plus, there are like NPC characters that can either invade your world or help you out if you want. I got invaded more often than I would summon help. To be honest, I never really figured out how to summon other NPCs to help me out unless it was like laid out for me. There is like a certain side quest that you can do where you have to invade other players, so I did invade some other NPCs. There's also a functionality that I missed out on because I do not pay for online, but apparently you can see like ghosts of other people playing, and you can leave messages on the floor and the walls providing like tips, or maybe you're just trying to trick someone and be a jerk. So there is like a lot of online functionality. Not worth the subscription price for me, but it would have been cool if I did have it. In order to explore this giant open world, you are given like a goat horse named Torrent. This thing is a game changer. I would recommend getting really good at combat on top of Torrent because it can really help you out with some of the bosses that are in the open world. You can't summon Torrent like when you're underground or in a building, but in order to like explore the actual world, it was so beneficial to just ride Torrent, run up, hit somebody on the side, and then run away before they could retaliate. And it can double jump. How cool is that? It can be a little overwhelming exploring this giant open world. I would even relate it to Skyrim, where there's really like no way you're able to 100% complete this game on your first playthrough unless you're following some kind of guide or walkthrough. I can only imagine how long that would take. I'm willing to bet I missed a decent chunk of things in this game, important dungeons even, just because there's just like so much to explore, and there's so many different side quests that will kind of guide you to certain areas. One of my big gripes about this game, though, is there's no like quest log that will track who asked you to do what and where these key locations are. You almost have to like keep a notepad with you or take notes on your phone on what characters say in order to be able to navigate this world fully and exactly fulfill all of these requests that you get. I can only imagine the really cool side quests that I have missed out on or haven't gotten to yet. There's a surprising amount of like platforming in this game as well, just trying to get to all these little nooks and crannies that are all over the place, either using Torrent or just jumping on your own, climbing on roofs, exploring all these ledges, because it's just like every nook and cranny has at least some kind of goodie for you, whether it's new gear or it's resources for you to use in order to craft items. There's a resource called smithing stones that you can use to upgrade your gear, and I really like how they did the weapon system in this game, where yeah, there are better weapons than others. If you really like a particular weapon, you can totally upgrade it to where it's actually somewhat feasible. I've used a giant lance for a lot of the game. I used a giant sword, but in the end, I ended up sticking with a really strong weapon called the Godskin Peeler, and this thing is basically like a giant dental hygiene tool. You know, the thing that they use to like scrape the plaque off your teeth when you do a dental cleaning? It looks like a giant one of those, but it's super fast, it hits super hard, and that's the one that I beat the game with. I do wish that there was a better compare gear option, so when you're like shopping at a vendor for items or weapons, gear, that kind of thing, there's no way to like compare, as far as I know, to compare how that weapon stands up to your weapon. So you kind of have to take like a leap of faith and just assume like, well, I hope this one's better than my weapon. Or what you can do is you can like keep on exiting out of the vendor, looking at your weapon, comparing the stats. But the thing about these weapons as well is they scale depending on like what attributes you have. So maybe like one of these swords is going to scale a lot better with strength than another sword would scale with your strength. Another gripe that I have always had with these FromSoft games is they do not let you pause, which is so baffling to me in this modern age, but I guess that's part of their whole take this game super seriously kind of thing though. But it's crazy because I feel like a kid again playing online multiplayer games. Like I can't pause, and so you know, maybe I'll be in the middle of like a super difficult boss and something will require my attention, and I have to decide like, do I want to die to this boss that I'm halfway through, or do I want to let the thing that requires my attention wait? If it involves a family member, I definitely recommend sticking with the former and just addressing that, because at the end of the day, this is a video game. This really is a game of high highs and low lows. This game is so good at building you up and making you feel so strong and powerful and efficient, like when you take down one of those bosses that was giving you a really hard time, and it's so good at just like pummeling you down to the ground and making you feel so discouraged, either by banging your head against a really difficult boss, or even just like the basic enemies. Like the amount of times that I've died just to like a pack of giant rats that I have easily killed in the past. Like it can be so demoralizing, especially when you have acquired all these runes and you're just about ready to cash them in order to level up, and then you die and lose them, and then you die again, and now they're gone for good, and you have to like rebuild yourself back up. Those are the moments where in the past I'm like, I can't, I don't want to play this anymore. But I made a promise to myself. I said, you know, in order to fully experience this game and really get what people love about it, I made a deal with myself that I was going to make progress every day, even if it's just leveling up once or exploring a new area, getting a new item. I needed to get some kind of progress here. And so if I was in the middle of trying to do a really difficult boss and I couldn't, I would just go off somewhere, grind up some runes, and level up at least once, and then I'd be done for the day. And eventually, like, this really paid off, just holding myself to that expectation to progress. Now, I know this is not something that's possible for everybody because this is a very time-consuming game and it demands your time. Like I said, this game took me about 65 hours and I didn't even do everything in the game. It can feel like a waste of time sometimes, like when after you've gotten all those runes and you've lost them all, it can be demoralizing, it can feel like you didn't use your time efficiently, but when you do overcome those hurdles, like there's nothing else like it. It is so satisfying and you really do feel like you did something. I get it now. Like I get the whole FromSoft experience. Will I go back to Dark Souls and Bloodborne and Sekiro? Probably not, because the option in this game with this open world setting to like go off and do different things and level up, it is a lot more appealing to me than just banging my head against the wall for the same challenge over and over again. But like I get why these games draw people in so much, and it's that those high highs and those low lows, and the interesting world building and the interesting lore, the fascinating characters that you come across, and the intriguing, grotesque enemies that you have to battle. There really is nothing else like these games. So, would I say that this game is the best game on the PlayStation 5? Yeah, probably. Like, it is such a unique experience just in terms of the world and the combat, and there's just so many things that are always in the back of my mind whenever I'm not playing this game. So what I'm saying is if you have the time and you have the dexterity to push through, even if you've never played a FromSoft game before, I do believe that most everyone can enjoy this game in one way or another if you give it the time. Yes, you do have to get good on some level, but it may just be your character that you're playing as getting good. I will be giving this game a 5 out of 5. It is an amazing experience, and I know that they just recently came out with the DLC for this game. I think it's called the Shadow of Erdtree, but the price tag is really a big ask for a cheapskate like me. It's $40, and that's as much as I paid for the whole base game. Not to mention, I am needing a little bit of a break from getting my butt handed to me over and over again, and so I don't know. I typically don't play DLCs, to be honest. I always intend to go back eventually and play the DLC, but it's like when I beat the main game, I need a break from that main game. But when I take too much of a break from the game, then I'm not ready to like plunge back into that world. I would need that time to familiarize myself with it again. And so if I'm being honest with myself, I probably won't play Shadow of Erdtree, but for now, I'm going to say, yeah, maybe. Well, guys, that's it for me. Let me know if you have any questions or comments about Elden Ring, and I'd love to hear what you have to say. Otherwise, I'll talk to you later. Bye!